Taman sat in the quarters provided by the inheritors, his head in his hands. 3 days had passed since the revelation in the tower. 3 days of touring Earth cities, seeing technology that should not exist, meeting people who were both human and Valorian and something entirely new. 3 days of understanding just how far his empire had fallen behind. A knock at the door made him look up. Hijin entered carrying a datapad. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. "I have been reading their historical records," she said without greeting. "Everything Jiwoo told us is true. The inheritors have been influencing galactic affairs for thousands of years. And, Commander, there is something else, something worse." Taman gestured for her to continue. "I ran genetic scans on some of the inheritors we met," Hijin said. "Then I compared them to genetic samples from our own crew. Commander, there are inheritors among us, on our ship. People who look Valorian, sound Valorian, but their DNA shows the hybrid markers." The room seemed to spin. "Who?" "I do not know yet," Hijin admitted. "The markers are subtle. It would take weeks to test everyone. But think about it, Commander. If they have been watching us for millennia, if they have been influencing events, why would they not infiltrate our society? Why would they not place their own people in positions of power to guide us?" Taman stood and walked to the window. The city outside glowed with soft light. Everything here seemed peaceful, beautiful. But beneath that beauty lay something terrifying. An intelligence that had been playing games with the galaxy for hundreds of thousands of years. "What do you think we should do?" he asked. "I think we have no choice," Hijin said quietly. "We cannot fight them. We cannot escape them. They have already won. They won before we even arrived. Now we can only decide how we want to lose." Another knock interrupted them. This time it was Junho, and his expression was grim. "Commander, we have a problem. I sent a message to the High Council 3 days ago, informing them of what we found. I just received their response. They are sending the Third Fleet, 200 warships. They plan to claim Earth by force." Taman felt his blood turn cold. "When will they arrive?" 6 days. Maybe 7. We need to warn Jiwoo," Hijin said immediately. But when they tried to contact the Elder, Yuna met them instead. She smiled sadly. "We already know about your fleet. We intercepted your message before it left the system, and we allowed it to be sent. The High Council needed to make their choice, just as you need to make yours." She led them back to the tower where Jiwoo waited. The Ancient One looked tired, as if the weight of centuries had suddenly become too heavy to bear. "Your leaders choose war," Jiwoo said. "We hoped they might choose wisdom, but we prepared for this possibility." "You cannot fight the Third Fleet," Junho protested. 200 warships with the best technology the Valorian Empire possesses. Even with your numbers, the casualties would be massive. "There will be no battle," Jiwoo said calmly. "Watch." The walls became transparent again, showing space around Earth. The inheritor ships began to move, forming complex patterns. Energy built between them, visible as streams of light that connected vessel to vessel. Within minutes, they had created a network that surrounded the planet. "This is a quantum barrier," Yuna explained. "A defensive system we developed 50,000 years ago. No ship can pass through it without our permission. No weapon can penetrate it. Your fleet will arrive and find Earth completely protected." "They will try to break through," Taman warned. "The High Council does not accept defeat easily." "Let them try," Jiwoo said. "We will not fire a single shot. We will simply wait, and while they exhaust themselves against our barrier, we will show them something." The Elder touched a control, and suddenly the space around Earth changed. Thousands more ships appeared, uncloaking all at once. These were not the peaceful vessels that had been visible before. These were warships, massive, bristling with weapons, each one larger and more advanced than anything the Valorian Empire had ever built. "This is our defense fleet," Yuna said, 1% of our total military strength. "We keep it hidden, but when necessary, we can deploy it in seconds. Your Third Fleet has 200 ships. We have 50,000 in this system alone, and millions more scattered across the 47 systems we control." Junho stared at the display. All color drained from his face. "How is this possible? How did you build so much without anyone knowing?" "Because you only looked for what you expected to see," Jiwoo replied. "You looked for civilizations that built the way you build, that thought the way you think. But we are different. We build our ships using biomechanical growth. We can create a warship in months instead of years. We do not need mining operations or factories. We grow everything we need." Mirai had joined them, and she studied the warships with scientific fascination. The implications are staggering. You have not just advanced beyond us. You have evolved into something we cannot comprehend. Now you understand, Jiwoo said. This is what 500,000 years of survival creates. This is what happens when you take two species and force them to become one or die. You get something stronger than either parent. Something that can hide in plain sight. Something that can wait patiently for the right moment to reveal itself. Taemin felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. What happens when the third fleet arrives? That depends on you, Yuna said. You can return to your ship and warn them. Tell them what you have seen. Try to convince them to turn back, or you can stay here and let events unfold as they will. If I warn them, will you let them go? Taemin asked. Jiwoo considered the question carefully. If they turn back peacefully, yes. But if they attack our barrier, if they try to force their way through, then we will respond. Not with violence. We will simply capture their ships, bring the crews down here and show them what we have shown you. They will have the same choice you have. And what choice is that? Taemin demanded. Join you or die. Join us or remain separate, Jiwoo corrected. We do not want to conquer the Valorian Empire. We do not want revenge for the abandonment. What we want is change. Your empire is built on a foundation of believing Valorians are superior to all other species. That belief has made you weak. You refuse to adapt. You refuse to accept help from those you consider beneath you. The elder stood and walked to Taemin, looking directly into his eyes. We are your children. The descendants of the people you threw away. We should have died. Instead, we thrived. We became stronger than you ever imagined, and now we offer you a chance. Join us, share your knowledge, learn from us, become part of a greater civilization, or go home, fight your civil wars. Tear yourselves apart. In 100 years, maybe 1,000, your empire will fall, and we will still be here waiting. Why do you care what happens to us? Hyejin asked. After everything we did, why would you want to help us? Yuna answered this time. Because you are still our family. Your blood runs in our veins. Your culture shaped our early development. You are part of us whether we like it or not. Elder Jiwoo lost their mother to the abandonment, but they also inherited their mother's compassion. We choose to be better than those who abandoned us. We choose to offer the help that was denied to our ancestors. Taemin thought about everything he had seen. The cities that maintained themselves. The technology that grew instead of being built. The people who lived for hundreds of thousands of years. The ships that could cloak themselves from all sensors. The civilization that had been hiding in plain sight, influencing events, shaping history. And he thought about his own empire. The civil wars that grew worse each year. The resources running out. The colonies rebelling. The people suffering while the High Council argued over power and pride. The Valorian Empire was dying. Everyone knew it. They had come to Earth hoping to find salvation in the form of a dead world they could claim. Instead, they had found something far more valuable. And far more terrifying. If I convinced the High Council to accept integration, Taemin said slowly, what would that look like? Would we lose everything that makes us Valorian? No, Jiwoo assured him. We do not want to erase your culture. We want to add it to ours. The Inheritor civilization is made up of hundreds of different cultures. Human tribes, Valorian traditions, and new things we created together. Each one is valued. Each one is preserved. But we are all equal. No one species is above another. That will be the hardest part for my people to accept, Taemin admitted. We have believed ourselves superior for so long. Then it is time to learn humility, Jiwoo said simply. The third fleet arrived exactly 7 days later. 200 warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, their weapons charging, their shields raised. Admiral Bora commanded the fleet from the flagship Valor's Pride. She had received Commander Taemin's messages about what he had found on Earth, but the High Council had ordered her to ignore them. Earth would be claimed. Any resistance would be eliminated. But when the fleet reached Earth's orbit, they found something they had not expected. The planet was surrounded by a shimmering barrier of energy. And beyond that barrier, 50,000 ships waited in perfect formation. Taemin stood beside Jiwoo in the tower, watching through the transparent walls as events unfolded. He had tried to warn Admiral Bora. He had sent detailed reports about the Inheritors and their capabilities. But pride and desperation had made the High Council blind. Your admiral is preparing to fire on the barrier, Yuna observed, reading the energy signatures from the Valorian ships. She follows her orders, Taman said quietly. Even when those orders are foolish, the fleet opened fire. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles struck the barrier. The light show was spectacular, but when the weapons dissipated, the barrier remained unchanged. Not even a flicker. The inheritor technology absorbed the assault as easily as water absorbing a few drops of rain. They are preparing for a second volley, Junho reported. He had chosen to remain on Earth, fascinated by the inheritors despite his initial suspicion. But the second volley never came. Suddenly, the Valorian ships lost power. Their engines went dark. Their weapon systems shut down. They drifted in space, helpless. What did you do? Taman asked, though he already knew. We sent a signal that disrupted their power cores, Yuna explained. A simple electromagnetic pulse, but precisely calibrated to affect only Valorian technology. Their ships are undamaged. Their crews are safe, but they cannot move or fight. Jiwoo touched a control, opening a communication channel to the Valorian flagship. Admiral Bora's face appeared on the screen. She looked furious and afraid. This is Elder Jiwoo of Earth, the Ancient One said calmly. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your ships cannot escape us. But we do not wish to harm you. We wish to talk. Will you come to the surface and see what Commander Taman has seen? Will you give us a chance to explain? Admiral Bora was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded once stiffly. I will come. But if this is a trap, know that the Valorian Empire will avenge us. There is no trap, Jiwoo assured her. Only truth. Over the next week, delegations from the Third Fleet were brought to Earth in small groups. Each group was shown the cities, the technology, the history. Each group met with inheritors who had Valorian ancestors. Each group had to confront the reality that the people they had thought inferior had surpassed them beyond measure. Admiral Bora was among the last to tour the cities. She walked with Taman through New Haven, her expression growing more troubled with each step. This is impossible, she muttered. How could they advance so far without us knowing? Because we did not look, Taman replied. Because we assumed we were the greatest civilization in the galaxy. Because we were so focused on our own problems that we never considered what might be growing in the shadows. They reached the memorial at the city's center, a simple stone wall covered in names. 3 million names. The Valorians who had been abandoned 500,000 years ago. My great-great-grandmother's name is on this wall, Yuna said, appearing beside them. She was a botanist who studied alien plants. When the evacuation orders came, she was told there was no room for her on the ships. She survived the impact in an underground facility with 200 others. Only 50 of them lived long enough to meet the native humans. My great-great-grandmother was one of them. Admiral Bora touched the wall, her fingers tracing the carved names. I was told everyone left behind died within weeks. That is what your High Council wanted to believe, Yuna said. It made the abandonment easier to justify. But we lived. We survived. And we built something remarkable from the ashes of our trauma. Over the following months, delegations from the Valorian Empire arrived on Earth. The High Council sent representatives, though many of them came reluctantly. They saw what Taman and Admiral Bora had seen. They learned what the inheritors had achieved. And slowly, painfully, they began to accept the truth. The Valorian Empire could not compete with the inheritors. They could not fight them. They could not ignore them. Their only choice was to accept the offer of integration or face extinction from their own civil wars and resource shortages. The debate in the High Council lasted 6 months. Some wanted to reject the offer out of pride. Others argued for acceptance out of desperation. In the end, survival won over pride. The vote was close, but it passed. The Valorian Empire would be dissolved. Its territories would become part of the Inheritor Collective. Its people would be welcomed as equals, not as conquerors or subjects. The process would take years, perhaps decades, but it would happen. Taman chose to stay on Earth. He became one of the first ambassadors between the Valorians and Inheritors, helping to bridge the cultural divide. Hijin joined the Inheritor scientific community, her eyes wide with wonder at the technologies she could now study. Yuno trained Inheritor security forces, teaching them Valorian tactics while learning their methods in return. Doyun became a pilot for the Inheritor fleet, flying ships that moved faster and smoother than anything he had dreamed possible. Admiral Bora returned to Valor to oversee the transition. It was not easy. Many Valorians resented the loss of their empire. Some saw it as surrender, others saw it as inevitable. But slowly, generation by generation, Valorians and inheritors began to blend, just as Valorians and humans had blended 500,000 years before. 10 years after the return to Earth, Taemin stood with Elder Jiwoo on a balcony overlooking the city. The old one had grown even more frail, though medical technology kept them alive. Below, the streets were filled with people, Valorians, inheritors, and those who were beginning to be something in between. "Do you regret your choice?" Jiwoo asked. Taemin considered the question. He had given up command of a starship. He had helped dismantle his own empire. He had watched his people accept a humbling truth about their place in the galaxy. "No," he said finally. "My people were dying. Our empire was built on pride, and it was collapsing under the weight of that pride. You gave us a chance to be part of something better. Something that could last." Jiwoo smiled. "Your ancestors abandoned mine. You could have done the same. You could have returned home and pretended you never found us. But you stayed. You convinced your people to accept help. That took courage." "It took desperation," Taemin admitted. "Desperation and courage often look the same," Jiwoo replied. In orbit above Earth, construction had begun on a new generation of ships. These vessels were designed by teams of Valorians and inheritors working together. They combined the best of both technologies. They would be faster, stronger, and more efficient than anything either civilization had built alone. And they were building many of them, hundreds, thousands, because the Inheritor Collective had a new mission. They would reach out to other civilizations in the galaxy. They would offer the same choice they had given the Valorians. "Join us and become part of something greater. Share your knowledge and learn from ours. Adapt and survive, or remain separate and face your own fate." Some civilizations would accept. Others would refuse. But the inheritors would be patient. They had learned patience over 500,000 years. They could wait as long as necessary. Subin had discovered something remarkable in the old records. The asteroid that had struck Earth all those years ago was not a natural event. It had been directed. Someone or something had pushed it toward Earth intentionally. The Valorian leadership had known this but kept it secret. They had used the disaster as an excuse to abandon those they considered expendable. The revelation changed everything. The abandonment had not been a tragic necessity. It had been a calculated decision. The High Council of that era had decided that certain Valorians were not worth saving and had used the asteroid as cover. When this truth became public knowledge, the last resistance to integration crumbled. Valorians could no longer claim moral superiority. Their ancestors had committed a terrible crime. The only way to atone was to accept the help of those who had been wronged. Elder Jiwoo lived another 20 years after the integration began. Long enough to see Valorian and inheritor children playing together in the streets. Long enough to see the first generation of true hybrids, people who carried the best of both civilizations in their blood and their culture. Long enough to see the fleet of exploration ships leave the solar system, bound for distant stars with crews of mixed heritage. On the day Jiwoo died, the entire Inheritor Collective observed a moment of silence. This ancient one had lived through the darkest days of the abandonment, had helped build a new civilization from ashes and ruins, had shown mercy when revenge would have been justified, had guided two civilizations toward unity instead of conflict. Taemin attended the funeral. So did Admiral Bora, now retired but still respected. So did thousands of others, both Valorian and Inheritor. They gathered in New Haven, the city Jiwoo had helped build 200,000 years before. Yuna brought them to a tower at the edge of the city. Unlike the other buildings, this one was made of ancient stone, scarred and weathered. It stood as a reminder of old Earth, before the inheritors had rebuilt everything. Inside, the tower opened into a chamber that felt more like a cathedral than a building. The ceiling stretched high above them, covered in stars that glowed with soft light. At the center of the room sat a figure in a chair that seemed to grow from the floor itself. The figure was old. Not old like an elderly Valorian, but ancient beyond measure. The skin looked like paper stretched over bone. The eyes had seen millennia pass. But when those eyes turned to look at the visitors, they held a sharpness that made everyone step back. "Elder Jiwoo," Yuna said respectfully, bowing her head. "I have brought them." The ancient figure smiled, revealing teeth that gleamed like metal. "So I see. Welcome, children of valor. I have waited a very long time to meet you. Taman found his voice, though it shook slightly. How old are you? 217,000 years, Jiwoo replied calmly. Give or take a few centuries. I have lived through the rise and fall of empires. I watched the ice ages come and go. I saw humanity grow from scattered tribes to the civilization that now spans dozens of star systems. The elder paused. And I remember the day your people left us to die. The weight of those words filled the chamber. Hyejin moved forward carefully. You were there? During the abandonment? I was a child, Jiwoo said. 8 years old by Valorian counting. My mother was a technician who maintained the power stations. My father was human, one of the native people your scientists had been studying. When the asteroid came, the Valorian leaders decided that only pure-blood Valorians of high status would be evacuated. People like my mother, who had married a human, were considered contaminated, unworthy of saving. Junho shifted uncomfortably. The old records say that everyone left behind would have died anyway. That saving them was impossible. Jiwoo's laugh was bitter and dry. The old records lie. Your leaders could have saved us. They chose not to. They looked at the cost and resources and decided we were not worth it. 3 million people. 3 million Valorian citizens and their families. Left behind like garbage. Mirai studied the elder with fascination. How did you survive for so long? Valorians typically live 300 years at most. We learned, Jiwoo said simply. In the decades after the abandonment, we studied everything we could find in the ruins. Medical technology, genetic engineering. The Valorian equipment was too damaged to use normally, but we could study how it worked. We combined that knowledge with human adaptability, and we created new sciences. The elder stood slowly, joints creaking. Despite the age, the movement held strength. Jiwoo walked to a wall covered in images, photographs preserved through the centuries. They showed the early days of the survivors. Valorians and humans working together. Children of mixed heritage playing together. Cities being rebuilt stone by stone. The first generation called themselves the Abandoned, Jiwoo explained. They were angry, bitter. They wanted revenge against those who had left them. But their children, the second generation, had a different view. They called themselves the Survivors. They focused on living rather than hating. And what did your generation call themselves? Taman asked. We are the Inheritors, Jiwoo said proudly. We inherited 2 worlds, the Valorian knowledge of the stars and the human knowledge of survival. We took the best of both and created something new. Something stronger than either parent species could have achieved alone. Subin examined the technology that filled the room. It was beyond anything the Valorian Empire possessed. Screens that floated in the air without support. Computers that seemed to think on their own. Materials that shifted and changed based on the elder's mood. This technology, Subin said carefully. It should not be possible. Our best scientists have tried for centuries to create stable biomechanical fusion. You achieved it hundreds of thousands of years ago. Because you were afraid, Jiwoo replied. Your people fear change. You fear becoming something other than pure Valorian. We had no such fear. We knew we had to change or die. So we changed. We experimented. We failed many times. But each failure taught us something new. Yuna spoke up. Elder Jiwoo was one of the first to undergo the longevity treatments. The early versions were dangerous. Many people died, but those who survived lived for thousands of years instead of hundreds. And you kept improving the process, Hyejin guessed. Every generation became stronger, Jiwoo confirmed. We learned to repair our bodies at the cellular level. We learned to transfer our consciousness to new bodies when the old ones wore out. We learned to merge our minds with machines sharing knowledge instantly across the entire civilization. Doyun had been silent until now, studying his scanner. Suddenly he looked up, his face pale. Commander, I'm detecting massive energy readings in orbit. Thousands of them. Oh, tens of thousands. They were there all along, but now they are becoming visible. On Jiwoo's command, the walls of the tower became transparent, showing the space above Earth. What Doyun had detected became clear. Ships. Thousands upon thousands of ships. They filled the orbit like a swarm, each one different in design but clearly advanced beyond anything the Valorian Empire possessed. We have been watching you since you entered this star system, Jiwoo said calmly. We tracked your journey from Valor. We knew you were coming months before you arrived. Did you really think you could approach Earth undetected? Juno's hand went to his weapon. This is a trap. No, Jiwoo corrected. This is a revelation. We wanted you to see the truth. To understand what you created when you abandoned us. Taman felt sick. His empire had thought itself powerful. They controlled 100 star systems. They had fleets of warships. They considered themselves the greatest civilization in the galaxy. But this one planet, this one forgotten world, had created something that made the Valorian Empire look like children playing with toys. How many systems do you control? Taman asked, dreading the answer. 47, Una replied. We have been expanding for the last 300,000 years. But we did it quietly. We hid our presence. We watched other civilizations from the shadows. We learned from them, and when necessary, we influenced them. Influenced them how? Mirai asked. Jiwoo's smile was not kind. We have been shaping galactic events for millennia. That plague that devastated your military 20 years ago, we created it to test biological weapons. The rebellion in the Corthan system that weakened your rivals. We funded it. The technological breakthrough that your scientists claim to have discovered? We leaked it to you to see what you would do with it. The implications hit Taman like a physical blow. You have been manipulating the entire galaxy. We have been preparing, Jiwoo corrected. For 500,000 years we have watched and waited. We knew someday the Valorian Empire would return to Earth, either to reclaim it or to seek help. And we knew when that day came we would have a choice to make. What choice? Taman asked. Jiwoo walked to the window, looking out at the ships that filled the sky. Whether to forgive you or destroy you, whether to welcome you as family or punish you for what you did to our ancestors. It has been a difficult decision. Many of our people want revenge. They remember the stories of the abandonment. They want to see the Valorian Empire burn. And what do you want? Taman asked quietly. The elder turned, and for a moment the ancient eyes showed deep sadness. I want what I have always wanted. I want my mother back. I want my childhood back. I want the life I should have had before your people decided I was not worth saving. But I cannot have those things, so instead I will settle for justice. What does that mean? Hunyo demanded. Una stepped forward. It means, Commander Taman, that you and your people have a choice to make. The Valorian Empire is dying. We know this. Your civil wars are tearing you apart. Your resources are running out. You came here hoping to find a dead world you could claim. Instead, you found us. She gestured to the ships above. We can destroy your empire in a matter of weeks. We have the technology. We have the numbers. We have been preparing for this possibility for thousands of years. Or, she paused, we can save you. We can share our technology. We can teach you what we know. We can integrate your people into our civilization and give you a future. At what cost? Taman asked. The Valorian Empire must end, Jiwoo said simply. Your government, your social structure, your belief that Valorians are superior to all other species. All of it must end. You must accept that you are no longer the masters of the galaxy. You must become part of something larger. The chamber fell silent. Taman looked at his team. Heejin's face showed wonder and fear. Junho looked ready to fight despite the impossible odds. Doyun seemed lost. Mirai and Subin simply stared at the ships above, understanding that everything had changed. Una led them through the silent city, and with each step Taman felt more uneasy. The buildings around them were beautiful, but wrong. The architecture blended Valorian designs with something organic, as if the structures had grown rather than been built. Windows curved like eyes, doorways pulsed with soft light. Everything felt alive. This city is called New Haven, Una explained as they walked. We built it about 200,000 years ago. It houses 5 million people, though most of them are not here right now. Dr. Mirai, the expedition's archaeologist, stopped walking. 200,000 years old? That's impossible. These structures look new. Una smiled. They maintain themselves. The walls are made from living materials that repair damage and adapt to the environment. We learned how to blend biology and technology long ago. Your people taught us the technology part before you left. Earth taught us the biology part after you abandoned us. Junho kept his hand near his weapon, scanning every shadow. Where is everyone? You said 5 million people live here, but I haven't seen anyone except you. They are watching, Una said simply. They want to observe you first, to understand if you come as friends or conquerors. After all, your people have a history of leaving when things become difficult. The comment stung, but Taman could not argue with it. The old records were clear. When the asteroid had struck, the Valorian leadership had evacuated their important citizens and left behind the workers, the scientists, and the lower castes. They had been deemed expendable. The cost of saving them was considered too high. Una led them to a large building at the city's center. Inside, it opened into a vast library. Shelves stretched up toward a ceiling that seemed impossibly far away. But instead of books, the shelves held crystals that glowed with different colors. Our memory archive, Una explained. Every crystal contains the knowledge and memories of thousands of people. We no longer write things down. We store them in living data. Would you like to see what happened after you left? Before anyone could answer, Una touched a crystal. The room around them changed. Suddenly, they were standing in a different time. The sky above was dark with smoke and ash. The ground shook with earthquakes. Valorian cities burned in the distance. Holographic figures ran through the streets, desperate and afraid. They were Valorian, but they wore the simple clothes of workers. Children cried. Elders fell and could not rise. And above them, Valorian ships rose into the sky, leaving them behind. 3 million Valorians were left on Earth. Una's voice narrated over the scene. Your leaders calculated that saving them would cost too many resources, so they left. They told themselves that everyone would die anyway from the impact, that it was not really abandonment if death was certain. The scene shifted. Months passed in seconds. The survivors had gathered in underground bunkers that had been meant for storage. They rationed food and water. They watched their numbers drop. 3 million became 2 million, then 1 million, then less. But some of us survived, Una continued. And we encountered Earth's native people, the primitive humans who lived here. They were so different from us. Shorter, weaker, with none of our technology. But they had something we needed. They knew how to survive on this world. They knew which plants to eat, which animals to hunt, where to find water. The hologram showed Valorians and early humans meeting. At first there was fear, then curiosity, then cooperation. The two groups began to help each other. Valorians shared their knowledge of medicine and tools. Humans shared their knowledge of Earth. Over generations we became one people, Una said. We married each other. We had children together. And those children were stronger than either parent. They had Valorian intelligence and human adaptability. They could survive anything Earth threw at them. Hijin watched with tears in her eyes. You created a hybrid species. We became a hybrid species, Una corrected. There was no choice. It was blend together or die apart. And once we started, we discovered something amazing. Human DNA was unlike anything in the galaxy. It was incredibly flexible. It accepted Valorian genetics easily and created something new, something better. The hologram fast-forwarded through millennia. The hybrid people spread across Earth. They rebuilt the cities. They recovered Valorian technology from the ruins and improved it. They developed new sciences by combining Valorian knowledge with human intuition. Their population grew. 10,000 became 100,000. 100,000 became 1,000,000. 1,000,000 became 1,000,000,000. Engineer Subin studied the displays with fascination. You advanced faster than should be possible. It took the Valorian Empire 50,000 years to reach spaceflight. You did it in half that time. We had advantages, Una admitted. We started with Valorian knowledge instead of beginning from nothing. And we had human creativity. Humans think differently than Valorians. They take risks. They try impossible things. Mixed together, we became unstoppable. The hologram showed the inheritors, as they called themselves, building their first spacecraft, then space stations, then colonies on other worlds in the solar system. Mars was terraformed. Europa's oceans were tapped for resources. Titan became a fuel depot, all within 100,000 years of the asteroid impact. Taman felt dizzy. His people's empire had taken 500,000 years to span 100 star systems. These people had rebuilt from nothing in the time it took Valor to fight a dozen wars. How far have you spread? He asked quietly. Una's smile faded. That is a question for later. First, you need to see more. You need to understand what you created when you abandoned us." She led them deeper into the archive, into sections that grew darker. Junho's unease grew stronger. His instincts screamed danger, though he saw no threat. They entered a room filled with biological specimens. Tanks held creatures that looked half animal, half machine. Some had features that seemed Valorian. Others were clearly from Earth. All of them were wrong. "Early experiments," Yuna explained. "When we first learned to blend biology and technology. Many failures, much pain, but we learned. We became very good at it." Mireille approached a tank containing something that might have once been human or Valorian. It was impossible to tell. "This is horrifying. This is survival," Yuna said coldly. "When you are left to die, you try anything to live. We made mistakes. We created monsters. But we learned from those monsters how to create miracles." She touched another crystal, and the hologram changed again. Now it showed the inheritors as they appeared today. Beautiful, strong, healthy. Their cities gleamed. Their people smiled. Children played in parks while adults worked in laboratories and factories. "We became what your people could have been if they had not been afraid," Yuna said. "We took risks. We failed. We succeeded. And we grew strong." Junho's scanner suddenly beeped. He looked down at it, and his face went pale. "Commander, I'm detecting movement. A lot of movement, all around us." Taman turned to Yuna. "You said people were watching. Show us." Yuna nodded. The walls of the room became transparent. Outside, thousands of inheritors stood silently. They filled the streets. They watched from windows. They waited on rooftops. All of them stared at the Valorian visitors with eyes that held no anger, no fear, only curiosity. 5 million people live in this city," Yuna repeated. "They are all here now. They all wanted to see the people who abandoned their ancestors. They wanted to see if you had changed. If you had learned anything in 500,000 years." Taman looked at the faces surrounding them. So many faces, so many eyes. He felt like an insect under glass. "What do you want from us?" he asked. Yuna's expression became unreadable. "First, we want you to see everything. Then we want you to make a choice. Come. There is one more thing you must see before we can talk about what happens next." The stars had never seemed so hostile until that day. Admiral Yuna stood on the observation deck of Luna Base, staring at the screens showing the largest fleet humanity had ever witnessed. The ship stretched across space near Jupiter like a metal storm, each vessel the size of a small city. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Her own fleet of 200 ships looked like toys in comparison. She had been drinking coffee when the first alert came through. Now the cup sat forgotten on her desk, growing cold while the universe changed forever. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone. Today they got their answer, and it was not the one anyone had hoped for. Dr. Hyun rushed into the command center, his tablet shaking in his hands. He was the best xenobiologist on Earth, trained for this exact moment, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was seeing. The alien ships did not match any theoretical design. They were beautiful and terrible, covered in symbols that hurt to look at too long. "Admiral, they are broadcasting on all frequencies," Hyun said, adjusting his glasses nervously. "It is a message. A demand." Yuna turned from the window. Her face showed no emotion, but inside her heart was racing. She had commanded ships for 20 years, fought in 3 colonial disputes, and earned every medal the Terran Council could give. None of that mattered now. She was about to speak to beings from another world. "Put it through," she ordered. The voice that filled the command center was not human. It spoke perfect English, but there was something wrong about it. Too smooth, too cold. It reminded Yuna of ice cracking on a frozen lake. "Humans of Earth. We are the Velkari Dominion. For 10,000 years we have ruled 300 worlds across 12 sectors. We have absorbed countless species into our empire. You will be no different. You have 72 hours to surrender your planet and all colonies. Comply and your integration will be peaceful. Resist and we will take what we want by force. This is not a negotiation. This is a fact." The transmission ended. Silence filled the command center. Yuna could hear her own breathing, could feel every eye turning toward her. She was 43 years old. She had a daughter on Earth studying art in Seoul. She had a sister on Mars working in the agriculture domes. She had a life that made sense just 5 minutes ago. "Get me the Terran Council," Yuna said quietly. "And someone find Captain Do-hyun. Tell him to prepare his squadron for combat operations." Across Luna Base, alarms began to sound. Captain Do-hyun was already in his fighter when the alert reached him. He had seen the alien fleet appear and knew what it meant. Unlike the politicians on Earth, he did not need time to think. The aliens had made a threat. That made them enemies. Everything else was just details. His squadron gathered in the briefing room 20 minutes later. 30 pilots, the best humanity had. They looked scared. Do-hyun did not blame them. He was scared too. But fear was just another thing to push through, like pain or exhaustion or doubt. "Listen up," he said, keeping his voice steady. "We all saw what just jumped into our system. We all heard what they said. They think we are going to roll over and give them everything. They think we are weak because our ships are smaller, because our weapons are primitive, because we have only been in space for 200 years. He paused, looking each pilot in the eye. "They are wrong about us, and we are going to prove it." On Earth, Ambassador Ji-won stood before the Terran Council in Geneva. The chamber was chaos. Representatives from every nation shouted over each other, demanding action, demanding answers, demanding the impossible. Ji-won raised her hand for silence and surprisingly got it. "We cannot fight them," she said simply. "They have the numbers. They have the technology. Every military analysis says we lose in a direct conflict. So we surrender?" Someone shouted. "No," Ji-won said firmly. "We buy time. We negotiate. We learn about them. And while we do that, every ship, every weapon, every defense platform we have gets ready for war. Because they are going to attack regardless of what we say. Species like this do not offer surrender terms unless they plan to attack anyway." She was right, though nobody wanted to admit it. Dr. Hyun worked through the night, analyzing every second of the alien transmission. The Valkyrie ships used quantum drives, something humanity had only theorized about. Their hulls were made from materials that should not exist according to Earth physics. They had energy shields, graviton weapons, and computing power that made human AI look like ancient calculators. But Hyun noticed something else. The Valkyrie ships all moved in precise formations. They maintained exact distances from each other. Their communication was rigid, formal, predictable. They were an old empire, and old empires became set in their ways. They did not adapt because they had never needed to. Humanity had only been in space for 2 centuries. Everything they did was new. Everything was experimental. They had no traditions holding them back, no ancient strategies they followed blindly. They could change, improvise, and do things no logical military would consider. It was not much of an advantage. But it was something. The 72 hours passed like 72 years. Earth's factories worked around the clock, building missiles and armor plating. Mars began evacuating civilians to underground shelters. The asteroid mining colonies sent every ounce of ore they had to the military shipyards. Humanity moved like it had never moved before, united by threat and fear and stubborn pride. Admiral Yuna did not sleep during those 3 days. She studied the alien fleet, mapped their positions, and planned strategies she knew would probably fail. Captain Do-hyun drilled his pilots until they could fly combat patterns in their sleep. Ambassador Ji-won sent 14 different diplomatic messages to the Valkyrie, each one ignored. Dr. Hyun kept searching for weaknesses that might not exist. When the deadline arrived, the Valkyrie fleet moved. They did not negotiate. They did not warn. They simply opened fire on Mars Colony Outpost 7, a research station home to 3,000 scientists and their families. The energy beams crossed millions of kilometers in seconds. The station's shields lasted for exactly 4 seconds before collapsing. Then the station itself ceased to exist, turned to vapor and debris. 3,000 people died before humanity could even respond. Admiral Yuna watched the destruction from Luna Base. Her hands gripped the command railing so hard her knuckles turned white. Around her, officers stood frozen, horrified by what they had witnessed. The Valkyrie had just committed mass murder to make a point. They wanted humanity to understand the cost of resistance. They got their message across. But they made a critical mistake. They showed humanity exactly what would happen if they surrendered. They showed there was no mercy in the Valkyrie dominion, no peaceful integration, just death and subjugation. Yuna activated the fleet-wide channel. Every ship, every station, every human military asset heard her voice. All forces, this is Admiral Yuna. Battle stations. We are at war. The war for humanity's survival had begun.